Good evening, students, Hillel staff, distinguished professors, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, Jews, and righteous Gentiles. My name is Paul Feingold, and I am a junior studying political science and Judaic studies here at Michigan, and I served this past year on the Hillel Governing Board. Thank you all for coming tonight to University of Michigan's first ever Latke vs. Hamantash debate, and please refrain from getting up to get food during the presentations. I know that is irresistible. And as all things Jewish must begin, I pose a joke. 3 Chaverim, David, Shlomo, and Yankov, die in a car crash. Chas v'shalom. But they were good Jews, so they go to heaven and are ushered into heaven's orientation. They are each asked, when you are in your casket and friends and family are mourning upon you, what would you like to hear them say about you? David says, I would like to hear them say that I was a great doctor of my time and a great family man. Shlomo says, I would like to hear that I was a wonderful husband and school teacher who made a huge difference in our children of tomorrow. Yankov replies, I would like to hear them say, look, look, he's moving. Andy Markets, everybody. As the saying goes, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Jews may never agree and certainly will never change their minds, but the arguing must always continue. Therein lies the proposition for this evening's debate. What is better, the latke or the hamantash? The latke, of course, is the fried potato pancake served during Hanukkah. Its rather oily consistency is a tribute to the oil that lasted 8 days when it should have lasted only 1 during the siege of Jerusalem. The hamantash is a stuffed pastry and is eaten in commemoration of the Jewish holiday of Purim, in which Jews celebrate escaping persecution in ancient Persia. Its triangular shape emulates the hat supposedly worn by Haman, the antagonist of the Purim story. Although different holidays and foods, the theme remains the same. They wanted to kill us, we won, let's eat. Thematic similarities aside, we join together tonight for a debate of sweet versus savory, circular versus triangular, and fried versus baked. But before I introduce the moderator, a brief history of the proposition. Although Talmudic scholars have argued this question since the passing down of the oral biblical tradition at Mount Sinai, an integral part of the Judaic 205 curriculum, the debate was formalized in 1946 at the University of Chicago. Held annually since, this is the first year the debate has come to U of M. The debaters to my side will make 4 presentations in support of the side they represent, drawing upon the disciplines from which they come. Therefore tonight, we have presentations drawing upon literature, economics, political science, and Judaic studies. This evening's moderator is Tilly Shamus, the Executive Director of the University of Michigan Hillel. Tilly joined the University of Michigan Hillel team in 2008. She brings to Michigan, along with her Canadian accent, a passion for Jewish life, Jewish community, Jewish identity, Jewish culture, Jewish food, Israel, and social justice through a Jewish lens. Tilly previously worked for 5 years at Hillel of Greater Toronto as Associate Director and Director of Israel Affairs. She holds a master's degree in international affairs and a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and political science. She loves art, traveling to new places, yoga, anything food-related, and diving into a conversation about your Jewish future. She once touched David Ben-Gurion's slippers and can tell you where to get good latkes in Nairobi, and that, of course, is not an endorsement. And with that, I thank all of you for joining the Hillel community this evening for what will become the first of many debates over these 2 Jewish staples. I introduce to you Tilly Shamus, Executive Director of Michigan Hillel.
Thank you, Paul. Now, I want to start off just by talking for a moment about my childhood, because I think that is the only thing that actually gives me some sense of credibility to be standing on the stage with our 4 distinguished panelists today. Now, my childhood in Toronto was very much shaped by my relationship with my Bobby and Zadie. And when one walked into the door of 5 Christine Crescent, which is where my Bobby and Zadie lived, one could be sure of 2 things. First of all, that you would be ushered directly into the kitchen, and in fact there was no hallway even between the door and the kitchen. It was as if you walked directly into the kitchen and you couldn't even avoid but to be ushered in to have something to eat right away. And the second thing you could be assured of is that you usually knew what you were going to eat even as you approached the door because of the smells that were permeating through the door that could reach out and grab you right from the porch. Now, my boobie came to Toronto in 1948 and brought with her this powerful repertoire of Ashkenazic delights from Poland. Now, several were too pungent for me to even get past the smell and appearance. First and foremost, pacha, which tastes about as bad as it sounds and smells even worse, and cold beet borscht with sour cream. Just the sound of it going around with a spoon would still send shivers up my spine. Now, chicken feet from the soup were gnawed on around the kitchen table as a delicacy before we sat down to eat. Matzo balls were always floaters, never sinkers, and we learned never to ask exactly what an eggie was. She made her own kreplach and always laughed at how much the prepared frozen ones were in the stores. But most important, as a Hebrew teacher of 33 years, she made us foods to correspond to the holidays. Now, latkes and hamantashen. Both were delicious. Both came once a year and were eagerly anticipated. And both were absolutely traditional. There were no fancy fruit options, prune and poppy only. I can only imagine what my boobie's reaction would be to Zingerman's Mexican vanilla bean cream cheese hamantashen that are available every year in Ann Arbor. It's a real thing. And no yams or beets or leeks or cilantro in the latkes, just potatoes and onions served with applesauce, nothing else. And both of these delicacies had their own dark side. The latkes came with such a powerful smell that it took hold of you as you walked into the door. It clung to your clothing and you left wearing it. We were not even allowed to walk into the home wearing our clothes. We had to strip off our clothes, run them over to the balcony, and dive straight into the tub. And then a few days later, once our clothes would air out, they would be run into the house directly into the washing machine. And the hamantashen, while delicious at first, were a rapidly ticking time bomb until they turned, well, in Canadian terms, we called them hockey pucks. A hamantash flung across the table at my brother's head would result in a welt and grounding immediately. Now, this debate between the latke and the hamantash and all the good and bad that they bring into this world has continued for the past 67 years at the University of Chicago. Thanks to our governing board member, Paul Feingold, who deserves our applause, and our four distinguished panelists here today, we bring this tradition into our Hillel to show our friends in Chicago just how we play here at Michigan. And it is my sincere hope that this will not take a triple overtime for us to finish tonight. As we enter into our debate, let us be guided by our sages and the disagreements of the houses of Hillel and Shammai, and say that this argument too is for the sake of heaven, and these and those are the words of the living God. We look forward to a clean and respectful fight by our heavyweight titans here on stage today. So let us start off with Dr. Jan Gerson, Senior Lecturer in Economics. Now, Dr. Gerson's current interests are teaching microeconomics and microeconomic policy. Her experience with introductory microeconomics includes teaching a special summer class at Nagoya University in Japan and presenting seminars on excellence in lectures and quality teaching. Her experience in public policy at the local level include serving on the Sire Township Board and Planning Commission, the county's Landfill Sitting Committee, and the county's Parents Advisory Committee for Special Education. Jan is one of the department's undergraduate concentration advisors, and Jan is often heard in the walls, around the hallways of Hillel and other places, saying her favorite Yiddish expression, which I'm going to attempt to you, even though I don't speak Yiddish. Für Geld bekommt man alles, nur kein Seichel nicht. Money buys everything except brains.
Well, it's a great honor to participate in this first annual, can you hear me? It's a little bit high, good. Latke Hamantash debate at the University of Michigan and present an economist's perspective on the age-old question, which is better, the Latke or the Hamantash? Let's go. Move. There we go. Which is better, the Latke or the Hamantash? Economists are experts in judging which is better, both in theory and in practice. Economists judge which is better in ways that affect our daily lives, as well as debating which is better for age-old questions. An economist's approach to decision-making is to conduct thorough research and examine the evidence to provide a comprehensive analysis and expert opinion. I'm going to share my research and evidence to give insight into how I reached my expert opinion that Hamantash is better. This debate hinges on what better means. So let's take a closer look at institutions tasked with determining which is better and figuring out how to accomplish it. So the Antitrust Division of the United States Department of Justice works to promote competition in the United States economy. As part of a deal for American Airlines and US Airways to merge and create the world's largest carrier, the airlines made concessions to protect air service and keep fares from rising. So if we look at better, better is to have lower prices, more competitive airfares, and better is to have more choices of flights. But sometimes better depends on your perspective. The airlines estimated that this merger will result in cost reductions and increased revenue of $1 billion a year. Next, the Federal Reserve System was created on December 23rd, 1913, that is nearly 100 years ago. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States, providing the nation with a safe, flexible, and stable monetary and financial system. The Fed has a dual mandate of maximum employment, this is better, and stable prices, again, better. One of the Fed's tools is its bond buying program. Better right now, from the Fed's point of view, is lower interest rates and stronger economic growth, which means more jobs. Next in my research, the International Monetary Fund works to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty around the world. That's a whole lot of betters. So if we look at the International Monetary Fund, we see concern about, here we go, catastrophic, a failure of the US government to pay its bills. That is worse, failure to pay bills. Indeed, better is the ability to pay bills. Finally, I have the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is one of the nation's premier nonprofit policy organizations working on fiscal policy and public programs that affect low and moderate income families and individuals. Worry over inequality occupies Wall Street. So if we look at what's better, again, strong economic growth. On the other hand, worse when we have growing income and wealth gaps that lead to public anger and an increasingly dangerous political situation. So, I'm going to put a plug in for one of my classes. Are any of you in my Economics at Work class Friday afternoon? All right. I saw one hand, no? Just joking. In Econ 101, right? Okay. So my Friday Economics at Work class, the speaker this Friday is an IMF economist, and the previous speaker is an economist at the center. So if any of you'd like to learn more about the IMF, I invite you to my Friday class, 1 p.m., Lorch Hall Auditorium. Or if you're interested in learning more about careers in economics, you're invited to register for Econ 108 next term. Economic theory also weighs in on which is better in the presence of externalities. For example, some people smoke too much, drink too much alcohol, consume too many fatty foods, and drink too many sugary soft drinks, imposing a cost on both themselves and others. Better is to give incentive to change that behavior, even better in Mexico, using a tax to increase prices and discourage consumption. Too few people would have access to education without federal student aid. It's better to have more college graduates living and working together in a community to boost the economy. Federal student aid, better, therefore makes that possible. So armed now with extensive criteria on how to judge which is better, went to examine the characteristics of a Latke and Hamantash and discover again that Hamantash is better. Advance. There we go. So first I found information about latkes. For $42, you can get 48 of them. And it comes with applesauce. Maybe that low price is good. Also, they're yummy. They're gourmet. And they're to send to loved ones. So we need to remember this for just a minute. I was hoping to find more economic variables, but that's just about all I found there. So moving ahead, we have Hamantash. And the first thing you might notice is the price of $30 for only 12 of them. That's a bit faded out. That's $2.50 a piece. More expensive. But I thought perhaps that higher price was a signal for higher quality and more expensive ingredients. Therefore, we can say Hamantash in that comparison is better. Next, I found advance. There we go, a prize. And wonderfully scrumptious. I thought wonderfully scrumptious and prize beat out yummy and gourmet. And in addition, it's multicultural. Good for Christmas. And there are many, many choices. You can see in addition to poppy seed, you can get an apricot filling and something else. So this wins on all the dimensions I could find. Perhaps you already agree with my expert opinion that Hamantash is better, but I was looking for more evidence and spoke with a number of economists about how to find additional evidence for this debate. They overwhelmingly suggested that I go back to basics and consider what Adam Smith would say. So Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, in his path-breaking 1776 book, The Wealth of Nations, pointed out that when we all act in our self-interest, that is when I act in my self-interest and you all act in your self-interest, the resulting outcome is best for society. So which is better? Boils down to, in my opinion, which is better. So what did I add to this? My grandfather was a businessman, a seed supplier to bakers in Berlin, and then the seeds man when he rebuilt his business in New York. My most vivid memory of my grandfather is of him singing Du du liegst mir im Herzen, or You are in my heart. My grandfather sold poppy seeds in artfully crafted decorator tins. Here's a picture of a few of them that were handed down to me. Hamantash, wonderfully scrumptious with poppy seed filling, speaks to my ancestry, speaks to my heart, and considering all evidence is unambiguously better.
Beautifully done. Next, we have Professor Julian Levinson speaking on behalf of the Latke. Now, Julian Levinson is the Samuel Schetzer Professor of American Jewish Studies. He teaches courses at the University of Michigan on Jewish civilization, American Jewish literature, and the Bible as literature. If you come across him walking through town, chances are he's thinking about latkes and reciting this Yiddish phrase. Wenn das Pferd wollt gehabt, wenn das Pferd wollt gehabt, was zu sagen, wollt es geret. If the horse had anything to say, it would speak up. Please.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, my field is English literature, and we kind of fudge it on things, as you know. You sort of speak eloquently if you can, and don't have to use too much evidence, but sort of mean it, feel it. And then you say ambivalent, and some people nod, and others look very confused. So I don't have any proof or evidence, but I'll do the best I can. Now, First I'd like to give you three different arguments, and then tell you why none of them actually really holds water. But let me start with what I would call camouflageability. It's a nice big word. Camouflageability. Let's say you want to really kind of Jew it up. You want to really, impress someone. You've got many Jewish credentials. Maybe you're at Seed Theater hanging out. You sort of, you're throwing in all your phrases here and there. And obviously, if the person asks you what you're eating, you'll say, a latke. On the other hand, you're unsure about your audience. You're unsure who you're talking to. You don't want to make a big deal. You don't want to... They ask what you're eating. You say a potato pancake. Camouflageability. Let's say you're talking to your rabbi, and he comes up, he says, what are you eating? You say, latkes. Yes, let's say a Nazi bangs on your door, potato pancakes. Okay. Now, camouflageability is a highly desirable thing. Next argument, how do you say it? Hamantash actually is singular. If you notice, they changed the debate. First it was Hamantashin, and now it's Hamantash. And with these Jewish things, you get very anxious. I don't know if you do, I get very anxious about how to pronounce things. And with Hamantash, Hamantash, have you heard Hamantash? Have you heard Hamantashen, Hamantashen? And then in Hebrew it's Haman, so it's a Hamantashen, and you're very confused and very anxious, and if you were dying for a Hamantashen, you don't even order it. It's terribly nerve-wracking. I would never put myself in that situation. I don't like being laughed at. I do not order Hamantash and Human, Latke. Latke. Very hard to mispronounce. The third one has to do with more conceptual matters. We know that Hamantash, comes from the Holiday of Purim, and we've got Haman, the evil empire embodied. Haman wanted to kill all the Jews, and we outsmarted him, and now we eat this thing, which is his hat, or his pocket. It's not very classy. Hanukkah. 8 days of light. It's beautiful. It's gentle. It's a little oily. Okay. We have things for that. I mean, you can't eat too many latkes, but, you know. Okay. Now, so, is that convincing? I have 3 arguments. You know, you come up with arguments one way, you come up with arguments the other way. In fact, that's probably why you're at the University of Michigan, so you can come up with great arguments, sound really smart, but luckily I don't actually need to make an argument myself. Luckily I'm part of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people know that if you yourself come up with some argument, it might work today, it won't work tomorrow, it's only on your own head. The good Lord would never abandon us. The good Lord has given us a tradition from Sinai, a tradition which is not standing upon the contingency of individual judgment, people fallible. We want it from Sinai. We get it from Sinai. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave it to us from Sinai. Har Sinai. Who do we turn to for the great authority, for the tradition, who will resolve this? Who do we turn to as the authoritative bearer of the tradition of Jewish food? Where do we turn for Jewish food? I'm asking. Grandmother, we should have such a good grandmother, but most of us turn to Manischewitz. Manischewitz, they know, they should know something, right? Let's ask Manischewitz. Do you know where I'm going with this? No, okay. Now I hope this is going to work. All right, Manischewitz, so let's start off with asking Manischewitz, you know, what, do you make latke mix? Okay. Homemade potato latke mix. Very nice. What else you got? Another homemade potato latke mix. Different box, a 6-pack, this. You want the no trans fat, you got the trans fat. What is trans fat? I don't know, I don't care. I don't want it, I do want it. L'chaim, let's eat it. All right. Next. Potato pancake mix. Not latke, remember camouflageability. Now, you have this on your table, you're doing fine, no one's gonna ask you any questions. It's a potato pancake. And if it says l'chaim, don't worry about it. The most important thing, no trans fat and no MSG. All right? You get that later when you go to the Chinese restaurant, but for now, you're okay. What's next for Manischewitz? Veggie. Very nice. Next thing they'll tell me it's only a serving suggestion with all this stuff, but for now, enjoy it. Look at that. All right, what else have they got for me here? Anything else, Manischewitz? Look! Sweetened potato pancake mix. evidently for Manischewitz, potato pancake, latke, whatever you want to call it, is very, very important. Mini potato pancakes. There's so many people with so many different approaches. They have different interest styles. Veggies, half veggie. Obviously, because they think about potato pancakes, they love them. They feel very deeply about them, and Manischewitz provides for them. What else does Manischewitz have to say for us? Garlic and rosemary potato pancake mix. And it's kosher for Passover. They make every possible variation. This, ladies and gentlemen, is only the, what do they call it? You got the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. This is the tip of the the tip. I can't bore you with all the pictures and things of Manischewitz for latkes. All right, fair enough. Now, fair is fair. Let's ask Manischewitz. How many kinds of Hamantash they make? It's a fair question. Survey said, no Hamantash! Not a single Hamantash has ever been made by Manischewitz. Ever. Doesn't Manischewitz make Hamantash? I'll leave that question to you. Thank you.
So our next speaker today is going to be Professor Ralph Williams. Now, Ralph Williams, as only Ralph Williams can do, has shared with me his bio in first person. And so I realized tonight that not only was I going to have to attempt to speak Yiddish, I was going to have to attempt to speak Ralph Williams. But I'm actually a ringer for this because, you know, I happen to speak Canadian. So here we go. I was considering extensions, but I was born in the frozen north, in London, Ontario, and went to school there through grade 13, you know. We took longer to get to university in Canada. And so what should a Canadian boy know about the Hamantash and Latke? When I first heard of them, I thought they were a partnership of gastroenterologists. Now, since coming to the University of Michigan as a graduate student, and then returning from Cornell to teach here in 1970, I found that he was not far from wrong, you see. Now, I am a fan of both Latke and Hamantash. My Israeli friend, Avner Segal, says that it is actually improper to use the singular form Hamantash because no Jew ever could eat just one. Now, one of the benefits of being Arthur F. Thurneau Professor of English Literature is that it enables me always to be on the right side of these matters. And I have a strong sense, you see, that the Hamantashen is the truer realization of the Jewish and indeed the human spirit. Now I have to try Ralph Williams and Yiddish together. That's not going to be able to happen. Es ist nicht warum, von dobra redele, nor von dobra meinele. Sweet talk doesn't make you warm, but sweet meaning does. Professor Ralph Williams.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be with you. I'm going to set this down for a moment. We're going to be back to it a little later. It is a drive that I got this afternoon from Stargate, right? In Michigan colors, all right? And thanks to the previous speakers, I am so deeply impressed by your research, and just so deeply impressed, Julian, sharing a department with you and all that enthusiasm. Such a load of nonsense. Absolute delight. It's my happy lot, that's an appropriate word for to praise Hamantash. And I will try to use that plural form as being the more appropriate. First, I must make it clear that my praise of the Hamantash is not intended to dispraise the Latke, unlike the previous speaker. Of which, in fact, there have been, that is the Latke, historically, because I've searched all historical records, I have found 6 tasty instances recorded in history. The dish is associated, that is the Latke, with the story, and with many stories, as with many such, it's a story of the struggle for freedom against oppression. Each victory in Judaism remembered by a dish, a food, which is to be part of Jewish culinary history forever. The story, for example, of Passover, is one which gives you the matzo. It seems a modest gift for a great trek, but to be used in many ways, it seems to have been easily portable and appropriate for the occasion. Rosh Hashanah is rather more luscious. You get apples, you get honey, you get challah, you get pomegranates. And as with so much in Judaism, that is ambiguous as well. You were so right on that. That is, it can be the 613 mitzvot, which sounds very much like duty and what you're to do and all that, and 613 bits of sweetness, which will carry you on into the deeds of the new year. And so one's grateful for freedom and its reminder in these. But latke? A potato pancake? Reeking? Soaked with oil? How did this happen? The story is of finding, as you know, in the temple, a container validated by the priest of olive oil with enough oil to last in a menorah for 8 days. Now I tell you, the first latke I ate, it's not the one your mother's made, but the first one I ate repeated on me for 8 days. And I thought, well, perhaps that's the reason why it's part of the celebration. That food is a culinary reward for such struggle. No wonder they called them the Maccabees, which, as you know, loosely translated is hammerhead. I wondered to my Irish family, because I'm a Goyish Canadian, right? Well, I wondered whether some Jews stopped by Ireland and brought potatoes back. What were potatoes doing back then? Were potatoes in Israel? Root crops? What is this? No, I found out the story was in Russia. And there I learned, centuries into the Common Era, that there was made this food, this potato pancake. And a Russian said, "Was ist it?" And someone said, I will try it. He took, and he said, Alka-Seltzer. Now, if you pay attention, Latke is almost an anagram in abbreviated form of Alka-Seltzer. And it has been associated with Latke through the ages since. So I thought, well, what about this wonderful holiday then? And I went out and I got this triangle, right? And thought, what about Hanukkah? And then I looked, and there's a noon and a gable and a hay and a shin. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And then I asked, and they said, well, it's Nes Gadol Haya Sham. Oh, so a great miracle happened here, right? I wondered what that meant. I'll be back to it, okay? But every Hanukkah you spin this thing, and you eat latke, and you say a great miracle happened here. We'll explain that. Right? Now, on the other hand, the story of Purim. It's not a story about hammerhead men sort of going and they cast out the Syrians, but then the Romans came. It didn't last, and all that lasted was the latke. Generation after generation, having the sign of remembrance of it all. Purim is the story of a woman. A gorgeous woman, like all Jewish women. Gorgeous. She is subtle. She's sexy. She knows how to use her talents and abilities and wit. She is a good politician. So she saves her uncle, Mordecai, and all her people. And we get from this a remembrance, the most voluptuous. This single piece of dough curved over. It is, as I will show later, the mystery of the many and the one. And within it are all those poppy seeds, the sign of fertility and the sign of the forgetfulness of pain and the remembrance of joy. This is the contribution of Purim. Now I want to indicate how these two foods have passed through history. And many of you know that I teach Shakespeare. So I went there. Does Shakespeare have anything to say about the latke? Yes, he does. It is in Hamlet. That is a play with a name whose first syllable does not address itself to a Jewish audience. It is there. And I found it. Now it takes a subtle interpretation, so you must hang on to this. Because as Julian said, we kind of work with complex evidence, which is not univocal. Anyway, it's winter. You remember at the beginning of the play, and everybody's cold. It's in Denmark, after all, and it's winter. Right? And Hamlet's father has been killed. He's upset about this, and he doesn't get the throne. His uncle does. He goes to tears. It's all very complex. But anyway, he complains that his mother married his uncle. Not that long, you remember, don't you? After his father's death. Now, if you do the computation, he says, speaking of his mother, and this marriage, that the funeral food, I'll paraphrase, right? The funeral meal, but it's baked good, they had a Jewish cook, served and was served cold as a matter of economy at the marriage feast. Now clearly it was Hanukkah time when Hamlet's father was killed. And the Jewish cook had a whole lot of latke on hand. And so that's all she could serve. And 2 months later, they served cold latke at the wedding ceremony. No wonder he's a melancholy Dane. He has indigestion. And you know that this is the correct interpretation, because almost immediately he has a soliloquy. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt. It became unbearably fat. God resolved itself into a doom. Right? He almost lost the do-well at the end of the play on account of that. Now, what about Hamantash? Now, I will reveal to you tonight what has never been said before about a textual variant in Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra. So this is special to this night at the University of Michigan. When Antony, you know the Roman general, yeah? Yeah, the Roman general. He's in Egypt, yet one another of those alpha Roman males who march through Egypt. Anyway, he is about to die. Falling on his sword, right? But before he dies, he speaks to his aide, Eros, appropriate enough, and says, Eros! I come, my queen, says he, speaking to Cleopatra. And it usually goes where souls do couch on flower, my queen, will go hand in hand. And with our sprightly port, make the ghosts gaze into the next world, you know. And then Dido and her Aeneas shall want troops. And it usually goes in the text, and all the haunt be ours. But I have found a manuscript. And it is not haunt. Says he, I come, my queen, where souls do couch on flower, will hand in hand. And with our sprightly port make the ghost gaze. Dido and her Aeneas shall want troops, and all the Hamantash be ours. Now, he doesn't die immediately. And he's taken to Cleopatra, who is really thinking of coming to peace with Octavian, the next Roman to come marching through. She's going to try to use her wiles on him. But he whispers to her before she dies, Hamantash, next world. And so, she commits suicide. Husband, says she, I come. No more the juice of Egypt's grape will stain these lips. Wine and Hamantash in the next world. And she leaves this world to get them. That is Shakespeare on Latke and Hamantash. And she goes there, and she joins that other great voluptuous woman, Esther. And the two of them talk about alpha males who want to use their bodies, and how they had to work hard to avoid them in the world above. But let me say a few words at the end in praise of, in reflection on the metaphoric and metaphysical qualities of the Hamantash. For in my view, reading over the story at the end of the prophet Malachi, there is a vision of the end of things. And in that vision, all nations of the world are going to be joined. And they are going to come up to Jerusalem and celebrate a freedom festival, Pesach, Passover, and doubtless they'll eat matzah. That is once a year. And they will eat latke. We praise latke as well. Especially the Jews will eat latke and they'll share it with their neighbors. But Purim, it is Purim, which is going to be the universal year-long festival of humankind. And here is the metaphoric nature of the Hamantash. It is a single piece of dough, all of us, our single humanity. It is folded over in a triangular form, the most stable of all figures. Within is the emblem of our differences, all the places we are from, Jew and Gentile and Canadian and Irish and English and Israeli and Arab and Muslim and Christian. We're all tucked in there somehow from that one human flesh in that stable form. And inside the convict, the forgetfulness of what it was we were arguing in all of history. And the universal year-long festival of Purim will be one in which in that afterlife we have Hamantash and we drink wine. It is said by the rabbis that we must drink so much wine that we will not know the difference between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordecai, cursed Haman and blessed Mordecai. In short, in the wisdom of the rabbis, we will at that time in the universal Purim forget the word curse and making divisions between cursing and blessed. Are you following again? And we will be joined. And before Cleopatra, who put up with all those alpha Romans marching across Egypt in her body, and Esther, who had to deal with an alpha male herself, they have a conversation. And as we all slip into that sweet oblivion, we forget our differences and bless us all. And that is why, given the excellence of Latke, Hamantash is the one which appeals to me more deeply as an emblem of the best in our humanity. And so, it happens that in Israel, there is, instead of the sheen at the end, as many of you know, a peg. Right? And in Israel, it is not, as here, a great miracle happened there, which we can say here. It's a great miracle happened here. And that is twofold. It's a memory of the coming to be of Israel, and then an old rabbi whose wife had made Latke all his life, and he had so tried to smile. And before he died, she made a good one. This is 1948, late in the year, Hanukkah time. And he said, a great miracle happened here. And ate later on a Hamantash which he had stored away.
Okay, and lastly, we have Professor Zvi Gitelman. Professor Gitelman is a prize-winning teacher and the author of 15 books, including A Century of Ambivalence, The Jews of Russia and the Soviet Union since 1881, which has been translated into Japanese and Russian. He is a professor of political science and Preston Tisch Professor of Judaic Studies at the University of Michigan, where he has been teaching for over 40 years. Gitelman is a leading authority on Russian Jewry and modern Jewish communities and politics in Israel and Eastern Europe. His most recent books include Ethnicity or Religion, The Evolution of Jewish Identities, and Jewish Identities in Post-Communist Russia and Ukraine, and Uncertain Ethnicity. Jewish Identities is based on over 7,000 interviews with Jews in Russia and the Ukraine. And clearly, Professor Gitelman is known to think about Die größte Narrigkeit von einer ist, was meint, as is klug. The biggest folly of the fool is that he thinks he is smart.
Question. The Talmud in Maseches Essen und Fressen, loosely translated as Tractate Gluttony, but now at the University of Michigan and elsewhere taught as Cultural Studies and labeled Foodways, relates a story of Rabbi Shmendrik, who posed the following question to his colleague, Rabbi Shmagege. And I quote, Oh. Ikla Rabbi Shmendrik le Rabbi Shmagege ben Arbor. Yeah. Rabbi Shmendrik came to visit Rabbi Shmagege in Ann Arbor. Iboilahu, and he asked him, Uchla de Shufla, Latke or the Hamantash? The best food is Latke or the Hamantash? Well, I won't bore you, but it does go on for a few pages. And unfortunately, at the end, the resolution is Teku. Tie score. They can't resolve the issue. The great medieval commentator, Rav Baal HaKeres, known in English as the Rotund Rabbi, speculates that the rabbis could reach no decision because they tried to answer the question empirically, as Michigan social scientists are taught to do. They ate unlimited amounts of Hamantash and of Latkes, and this left them, as we say in Aramaic, indisposed. Therefore, the greatest minds of the previous generation, having failed to solve this issue of paramount importance, an issue that ranks right up there with war and peace, climate change, environmental degradation, the future of the human race. Therefore, it remains to us to solve this critical dilemma. So what is better? Latkes or Hamantash? I see there is obvious evidence for the superiority of the Latke, in several sources. Classic Jewish texts, medicine, etymology, the Shakespeare that has been so miserably misinterpreted, misquoted, vocalized, distorted, done violence to by the previous speaker whose name I shall not even dare to mention.
Ralph Williams.
Bam! Boom! And music. So let's examine the evidence. Remember the story about the Maggid, the preacher, who knew only one sermon? Parshas Korach. The story of Korach who was swallowed up by the earth. But there are 51 other Shabboses during the year where he has to give a sermon. So what did he do? He got up there and he took his magic marker and he dropped it. He said, may the earth swallow up the magic marker just like I swallowed up Korach. Speaking of Korach, that was not in the original. So let's start with the Bible. It's plain as day. The book that some of you call Leviticus, which is actually called Vayikra, steht in Posuk Hazeh. V'nefesh ki takriv korban mincha l'Hashem. Zes noch einmal Korach. Solet yihye korbano, v'yatzak aleha shemen, v'natan aleha levona. In plain Hebrew, it means a person who brings a gift offering, korban mincha, to God. The offering shall consist of fine flour with oil poured on it and frankincense added. A free will offering, the best kind of offering to God. What is it made out of? It's a latke. Flour and oil. You will say, listen, Chacham, but what is frankincense? Now, frankincense, see, Williams goes back to Shakespeare. I go back to ancient Celtic and Anglo-Saxon. What is frankincense? It has three meanings. One, the pshat, the plain meaning is Frank is angry. He's incensed. The rabbis, however, give it two additional meanings. Frankincense is an ancient form of sour cream. Or, if you wish, of applesauce. Now, can you imagine bringing a sacrifice, which is an oil-soaked, sour cream-covered Hamantash? Ridiculous. Obviously, this most prized sacrifice of the Bible, the Korban Mincha, is a latke. If we continue reading in Leviticus, and we go to chapter 5, we find the following. There's a second kind of sacrifice, a sin offering. Someone does something bad, someone sins, they bring a sacrifice. Korban Asham. Verse 11, chapter 5. Lo yasim aleha shemen, velo yiten aleha levona ki chatati. He shall put no oil or frankincense on it, because it is a sin offering. What is a burnt offering that has no oil or frankincense on it, but is burnt? Right, a Hamantash. An overbaked Hamantash. Ladies and gentlemen, a Hamantash is associated with sin. So the sine qua non of a voluntary, good-hearted, generous offering is that it is soaked in oil, whereas sin is not associated with oil or with Frank's anger, or with applesauce, or with sour cream. So much for the Bible. Now here I have the tractate in which the story of Hanukkah appears. It's a little bit misplaced because the tractate is after Shabbat, but never mind. And the Gemara asks a simple question. My Hanukkah, was ist das für ein Yontif? What is Hanukkah? What kind of a holiday is it? So, as Williams, occasionally he gets it right. He explained, 8 days, okay, you got that, right? So they found the oil, and the oil was supposed to last for only 1 day, and miraculously it lasted for 8 days. But when he didn't, because he's a bit limited, his Hebrew vocabulary consists of 50 words, mostly having to do with what he calls a dreidel, which means he's a Galicianer Irishman from Canada. There's a sentence that he left out. A year later, a year after the miracle, the rabbis designated these days as Yamim Tovim, as holidays, on which praise and thanksgiving were said. Imagine 1,500 years ago, when the Talmud was compiled, Hanukkah and Thanksgiving went together. Not Christmas, chas v'sholem. This ain't America. Now it's true, as some pedants and nitpickers will point out, that Hanukkah was declared 2,178 years ago. And Thanksgiving began in 1863. But by November 29th, 1888, Hanukkah and Thanksgiving came out on the same date as they do in 2013. Is this a coincidence? Hardly. First of all, it's going to happen again in the year 2070, and once again in the year 2165. So in alle 11 and 11, we should all live and be well until the year 2165. Just wait and see. What, however, is the connection between Hanukkah and Thanksgiving? Oil and grease. Baste the turkey with lots of oil. Ta-da-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Shove the bird down in your moil. Ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Stuff the bird with lots of latkes. Ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Just make sure you hold on to your latkes. Ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You may have noticed, those of you who still read newspapers, you know what a newspaper is. Yesterday's New York Times, the lead story, the lead was as follows. Last week, the nation's leading heart organizations released a sweeping new set of guidelines for lowering cholesterol, along with an online calculator to help doctors assess risks and treatment options. But in a major embarrassment to the health groups, the calculator appears to greatly overestimate risk. It's stunning, said the cardiologist Dr. Stephen Nissen, the head of the Cleveland Clinic. We need a pause to further evaluate this approach. Pause schmoz. Dr. Nissen, may I suggest that you brush up on the works of the greatest Jewish physician of all times, Maimonides. In his famous book, The Guide to the Nutritionally Perplexed, Maimonides, or the Rambam, wrote as follows. La'olam yaichal adam shont kishke pichah ribenes schmaltz v'al hakol latkis. I'll explain. La'olam, forever. Notice, oilam. He was a Sephardic Jew, but he spoke like a Polish one. A Jew should forever and anon eat chont. I hope you know what that is. Stuffed durma and believe me, you don't want to know what it's stuffed with. Jellied calf's foot, picha, about which we heard. Goose skin cracklings with fried onions. Chicken fat, and above all, latkes. Of course, in translation, it loses all its flavor. Or as we say in Turkish, esotnik kenirish tam. All right, that is true. Maimonides was a Spartan. So instead of latkes, he probably ate donuts, jelly donuts. But for Ashkenazim, who had very little dough, but plenty of nuts, latkes, which comes from the Russian and Polish meaning a patch, were good enough. And in fact, the advice given by Maimonides has been followed faithfully for generations of God-fearing, Torah-true Jews. And this is why every Jewish mother, from Sarah the matriarch down to today, has prayed that her son Itzik or Sammy or Marvin or Scott, and now even her daughter Melissa, Sarah, Rachel, would become a cardiologist. Patience, Jewish patience, they will not lack. My dear friends, what is the Hebrew word for Latke? Huh? Leviva! Very good! What is the root, the shoresh of the word leviva? Lev! Now you got it. Now you got it. If you eat levivot, if you eat latkes, it's going to affect the cholesterol. And now I'll give you the medical clincher. What is the Hebrew word for Hamantash? Oznei Haman, ears of Haman. Let's be honest. I'm giving you a choice. What would you rather snack on? Chont, kishke, picha, gribenes, and latkes? Or bite off and champ on the ear of a wicked antisemite? Etymology. We've been talking about cholesterol. Have you ever stopped to think of the origins of the word cholesterol? Right? Let's parse that word. There are two versions. They are both fusions of Hebrew and Yiddish. Hebrewish or Yidru. This one means cold, everyone, kulam, essen, Hebrew, Yiddish, everyone eats, oil. Aha, Gitelman, you're such a chacham. Research has shown that ter is a medieval Akkadian Proto-Sumerian word. Its exact meaning for the moment escapes us. This coal, ester, oil. What does that mean? Coal, English. Ester, we heard a distorted version of that. Oil. Well, it does indeed, as Williams stumbled upon this quite accidentally. It does have to do with Purim. When the Jews of Persia were threatened with mass annihilation by Haman the wicked man, they took counsel. Mordechai, whipping out his iPhone, said, "I'll call Esther." Call Esther. That beautiful girl. Well, Mordechai was from Brooklyn, so he didn't say girl, he said girl. You know, think about it. How does the Megillah, how does Esther describe Mordechai? Asher hagla miflat bush im hagola asher hagla yechon yom melech Yehuda. Right? Actually, closer examination of the Megillah reveals that Mordechai was not a Brooklynite, and he actually had said oil and not goyle. What did he mean? Remember how the scroll of Esther describes how the ladies of the harem prepared themselves for, shall we call it, visits to the foolish king? I quote to you, chapter 2, verse 5. Now when each girl's turn came to go to the king Achashverosh, after undergoing the prescribed 12-month care for women, they completed 6 months of bathing in the oil of myrrh. 6 months in the oil of myrrh. A mere trifle. Mordechai was essentially telling his niece Esther, listen, cutie pie, you didn't soak in oil for 6 months for nothing. Go do your thing and save the Jewish people. How did Esther save the Jews? By soaking herself in oil, not by chewing on Haman's ear. I'm almost finished. Now I'm going to go after him. I've had enough of this Williams cult stuff. Shakespeare. You know, he did not badly because he read Shakespeare in the English translation. I, however, have had the privilege of reading Shakespeare in the Yiddish original. It's true. If you look at the Yiddish edition of Shakespeare's works, you'll see Alle Werk von Welwele Shakespeare, complete works of Billy Shakespeare, verteidigt, vergrößert und verbessert, translated, expanded, and improved. And here is the original Yiddish version of Sonnet 18, subtitled Ode to My Lady Latke. I can't really do that, really. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. The Hamantash is filled with jam. It's not much better than eating ham. Or perhaps it's filled with that stuff called lekvar. Can you think of anything more bizarre? I've seen it stuffed with poppy seed. You might as well fill it with a noxious weed. But you, my Latke, why, you're a bit flat. To you I tip my religious hat. Oleaginous you are indeed, but that's precisely what I need. In brief, my dears, Hamantashen are chaloshes, and eating them brings nothing but solace. They are so disgusting, they take enough kapores. On Hamantashen, you can make no broches. So here's to the latkes, they are truly nutritious. Nothing but a latke could be so delicious. We end with music. We are going to compare a Purim song in Hebrew and a Hanukkah song in Yiddish. Sing along if you like. The Purim song in Hebrew. Chag Purim, Chag Gadol hu Layehudim, Masechot Rashanim Shirim Berikudim, Hava Narisha, Hush, 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 Hava Narisha, Hush, 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 Hava Narisha, Hush, 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 Bahar Ashanim. The word Hamantash does not appear. I mean, why should it? Can you imagine singing the following? I had a little Hamantash, I made it out of clay, and when I bit into it, oy vey was all I could say. Right? So now we will end with the Hanukkah song, and you will see the difference. It's not just the difference between Hebrew and Yiddish. It's the difference in content, substance. Oy Chaneke, Yontef Hasheiner, al ich diker afreilechen, ich do noch azeiner, alle Nacht mit Redlach spielen mir, frische heiße Latkes est on Ashir. Right? Hanukkah, a beautiful holiday, a holiday of light, a happy holiday, none like it. Every night we spin the dreidel. Frische heiße Latkes est on Ashir. You eat fresh, hot latkes without any bounds. Latkes are praised in song. Hamantash, nowhere to be found. So please join me in a rousing chorus of Alich diker afreilechen, ich do noch azeiner, alle Nacht mit Redlach spielen mir, frische heiße Latkes est on Ashir.
Well, that was an absolute delight, and in keeping with the tradition that was set at the University of Chicago, we have 4 winners here today that will all receive gifts from our students. And the debate continues. Thank you so much to Paul Feingold for setting us up with our first annual Latke versus Hamantash. You're whispering something to me. I can't hear you. Oh, and there are books. Are they not provided? Oh, they're underneath here. In addition to those presents, we have the great Latke Hamantash debates. Latke versus Hamantash. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope that you join us next year as the debate continues. Enjoy. There's still food at the back.